Welcome to the show. It's IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling. It's Thursday, and we're doing things a little bit different this week. First, the formal introductions. He's Vince DeDario. I'm Sean Stiers. We usually have the mailbag on Wednesday, but we had a Marcus Freeman press conference yesterday. So Trevor and I spent some time talking about some Marcus Freeman, you guessed it, quarterback comments. We did that on yesterday's show. It feels like the quarterback conversation is starting to run its course.
Yeah, I got in. I wouldn't even say got into it. It was like one back and forth with somebody on Twitter. They said, Angeli transferred because he was clearly going to be the number 2 quarterback and wanted to start. I said, that first tweet was wrong. And then the second one was basically, look, I agree with you that he wanted to start. No doubt about it, but he was not.
His place in the pecking order, I think, is obviously,
Like, I guess you can tell yourself whatever you want to help you sleep at night, but that was definitely not the case.
And I always love the people. Well, I mean, it's kind of like you sometimes, let's just be quite honest, who speak very declaratively. And I realize,
that's fair. Yeah,
the game that we're in, we're supposed to have an opinion.
Got to have an opinion.
Yeah, but to say that he was clearly the number 2. I mean, that is clearly a very subjective statement that you're making there. So I think my statement is much less subjective than his.
I listened to some of the show yesterday.
Okay.
So I have to ask you, did this come up when Jesse came in to do rapid fire? Shadow Hokey says, congrats on the free meals, gents. Or are we saving that for tomorrow when we can get him in here face to face?
It did not. It'll well, hold it. I think I might have brought it up, and he quickly avoided the subject.
Okay.
Was kind of the way it worked.
That sounds about right.
If I remember right.
Okay.
I can't even remember now. I can't remember if Angeli had made his announcement at that point.
Fair.
Or not. It might have happened like at the back end of the show.
Right.
So.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's fair. Yeah. I don't know what time that actually came out. And you sent me a text. That's how I found out, was the text that came through.
Salty says it came up. So, that's what I remember, is it did come up. Yeah, because I think I mentioned Ruth's Chris as my selection.
Well played, sir.
Yes. I mean, it's like, if we're going all in.
He's going to feel like I went to Ruth's Chris because I had 5 children.
I know.
Even though
you could literally just get cheeseburgers and it's going to feel like you picked Ruth's Chris.
And he delineated the restaurant for me, and I'm totally fine with that. So we're going to do Culver's because that's what, he said we should do. Okay. And I'm cool with, like, my family loves the Culver's. So it's
honestly, I might just tell him to like DoorDash me a pizza tomorrow night is kind of the way I'm feeling. And maybe I'll just bring in a slice during the show.
I like that plan.
A feast on our time.
I know, right?
That's where I'm going with this. So.
Oh, it's just so fun. It's just so much fun.
I think so as well. All right, well, let's jump into the mailbag. We've got a few questions queued up. It is mostly Salty and Irish English, who makes periodic appearances in this here show. Let's start with one from Mr. Irish English. The entire quarterback room plus Buckner lines up to run a 100-meter sprint on a track. Loser buys a pitcher of Gatorade. What is the order of finish in this sprint?
I don't know enough about Anthony Rezac. I don't know enough about his speed. He was Mr. Football in Nebraska, so I believe he was a dual threat kind of a guy. So I bet he's got some wheels. Okay, so here's how I would think it's probably going to go. If we're going to include Buckner, I think he's probably first.
That's what I think. I think Buckner wins it.
Yep, and I think Kenny Minchie's probably next.
Yeah.
And then I think I'm going to go Rezac.
Ooh, okay.
And then I'm going to go Carr. And then I would go Hebert. Those are just those are guesstimates.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea like what Hebert and Rezac's speed looks like.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Carr ahead of Rezac.
Okay.
So I'm going to put him third. So I would go Buckner, Minchie, Carr, Rezac, Hebert, kind of a dead heat bringing up, like
That's
they didn't
fair.
quite they didn't get out of their heats, like
I mean, I think it's a fun question because I've never seen Hebert or Rezac run around. And I'm not saying that CJ Carr is like, this unathletic guy because he can pick him up and put him down too. I don't know. For some reason, I just have this feeling that Rezac is a little bit more athletic. You know what I mean? He's just kind of an athlete out there being quarterback kind of a deal because of what he was in high school. But I mean, it's a guess. It's 100% a guess. But that's a really good question. I would like to see that race.
I would too.
Yeah.
I think that would be, like a fun, like Rich Eisen always does
the
the
40-yard dash.
He does the 40 NFL draft and, the big, is it Shriners Hospital that they give
so.
the money to?
That sounds right.
That the proceeds go to. So I would, it's kind of like that. Like if you line those guys up on the first day of fall training camp after, coming out of a summer of conditioning and all that kind of stuff, I think that they could have some fun with that. Put it up on their social media and, like maybe do a little charity thing.
Look at this. Look at this. Oops, wrong one. There it is. Rezac ran a 4.48. That's legit.
Interesting.
That's legit.
That's a very legit. So maybe I do put Rezac in third. I didn't realize, like looking at him, I wouldn't have guessed that he would be a burner like that.
Look at that. I'm feeling good about my prediction. I'm just saying.
Okay.
I'm feeling good about
maybe Rezac even pushes Minchie for number 2 out of this whole thing.
It's a great question. Because
I'm still giving Buckner the number 1 spot.
Yeah. Oh, that one's the no-brainer one, right? And Minchie. What's interesting about Minchie, and I know Brian has brought this up on his show before, is he wasn't really a runner in high school. He has added that to his arsenal in college to kind of help separate him from some other guys and things like that. He was a pocket passer in high school. So, I don't want to assume that he's the second fastest, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt in this regard.
Yes. I got a text from the boss there, so I was just answering it while I had.
Did we say something wrong?
No, not at all. No. He was just asking me a question about something.
Woo, man, never know.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out which salty question I want to go with. I like this one.
Okay,
start with this one. Did any Irish player do more to make a big jump this spring than Elijah Burris?
I think you could make a case for Tay Johnson at safety. Let's see. Who else could I make a case for? I mean, can we make a case for Minchie and Carr? Because apparently Angeli was the presumed starter.
True.
I think TD4ND says Sneed. I think you could make a case for Sneed because he was coming out. He was jogging out with the starters. And, I don't know if that'll be the case.
He was still a significant, feels like he's made progress, but he was still a significant guy last year. So it's not like he was carried on the depth chart.
And I am not convinced he will be the starter once August 31st rolls around, but we'll see what happens. Somebody said Raritan. I was always high on him, so I don't know.
Raritan's a good one. This is the first time he's really had the chance to kind of show his stuff, between the injuries and being younger and just being buried a little bit more on the depth chart. He definitely, I think that's a good candidate. Okay. I like that. Like, I think that's a better candidate than Sneed just based on the fact where they, what they did last year, as kind of a, where you're moving from.
Craig D took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say Carson Hobbs. I think he made a pretty significant jump to put himself in contention to be that third corner. Like what I saw from him. And look, Elijah Burris had a really good spring. I get nervous about wide receivers having a good spring just based on the past where receivers have had good springs and it doesn't exactly translate to the fall.
They always,
especially
the young ones, they always build everyone's expectations.
Right, exactly.
And then what comes of it. Yeah, for sure.
So that makes me a little nervous about Elijah Burris. He had a great spring. I mean, I'm not going to take anything away from what he did. But let's see what the fall looks like before we start anointing him as the biggest jumper on the team.
No anointing lotion. That's right. Tay Johnson would be my number 1 for sure.
Yeah.
Like this guy really just came out of nowhere, and I think that there's a strong case when you look at the decision of a guy like Kennedy Urlacher to enter the transfer portal that the ascension of Tay Johnson, really might have ultimately just been a tipping point,
right?
For Urlacher to hit the portal.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Blair, I think, had a good spring, as an incoming freshman. That safety room is super deep, and it was very obvious, I think. So, yeah.
Portal. Transfer portal is
go.
almost closed.
Yeah.
It closes tomorrow / Friday. Women's basketball portal is closed, and we were talking about that a little bit before the show started. But Salty says, does the very small number of Irish players entering the portal to date surprise you? Do you expect a lot of activity tomorrow? Thoughts on this, VD?
Man, I am expecting a lot of activity, but I was expecting activity today and didn't get it.
Been kind of expecting some activity this week.
Yeah, and we've gotten literally nothing. Crickets across the board. And, it's funny because you're in a position now where, you've got this house settlement and the 105 is in question as to whether that's going to be a hard 105 in the fall and all these different things. And you're really kind of leaving a lot of these guys hanging out to dry with the longer that this thing drags on, because the portal's going to close and these guys are either going to make the 105 or they're going to get cut if the 105 ends up being a thing. You know what I mean? So it's like, if I was a Notre Dame player who's like on the bubble, I would almost enter the portal with the understanding
you can still come out,
that I can come back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Have the conversation with Marcus Freeman. Look, I'm putting my name in just in case.
To give myself an out and just in case I get cut. I mean, it really stinks because it's putting these guys in a very, very awkward position. You know what I mean? And so that's what I would do. That's what I would counsel my son to do if he was in that position. Be like, look, coach, I love it at Notre Dame. I want to be at Notre Dame. I want to be on the roster. But I also understand you have a job to do if it's 105 and I still want to play football. So I'm going to put myself in the portal. If there's room for me on the squad, I want to come back. That's my number one. That's my preference. But I also don't want to be in a situation where I'm just a regular student next year.
Right.
That's what I would do. I don't know what these guys are going to do. So
you went down a completely different road with this. I'll just say, based on rumblings, things we've heard, we've kind of been expecting some guys to enter the portal, and I've seen, our guy Dylan, posting about it on the Champions Lounge as well, and he's one of those guys who's very dialed in, to information as far as what's going on and stuff like that. It hasn't happened so far. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen this week or next week or whenever. Like, everyone kind of makes those decisions on their own time and for their own decisions, and who knows? Maybe some of these guys have changed their minds. Just, it's
right.
It's hard to say.
We've heard a lot of different names, and I was expecting movement. I'll just say that. And so I don't know. I just don't know. And I know the judge doesn't want the 105 and wants a grandfather situation and all that, but both sides have to agree. That's the thing. It's not a one person situation here. There has to be agreement here. And so this thing could just keep going. And that's the thing.
Well, but again, like some of the names, that we, kind of heard, I think have nothing to do with the 105 conversation either. Some do, some don't. Right.
Great point. Yeah, no, great point. Because all the guys we were talking about behind the scenes are all scholarship players, right? So, they wouldn't be first on my list on the cutting block.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll say that.
Exactly.
They
would be very safe. They're, they're still going to fall in that, probably top 40.
Right.
Type. And, since you've been talking about the 105, Salty wants to know how confident we are the 105-man roster limit will be in place by the fall, and will there be a grandfathering phase? Like Vince was just saying, that's what the judge wants. For whatever reason, the NCAA is pushing back on this, and they can't come to that agreement, which is baffling. But then again, it's the NCAA, so why should anything surprise us with the
Right.
NCAA.
Right.
So I ultimately think it will be in place, but if it is, there's going to be the grandfathering of the roster. So they're not just going to push everybody out this year. That weeding out will kind of continue to place over the course of the next year.
I feel like it's trending in that direction.
That's what I think, just based on what we've seen.
But you're asking for my confidence level. It's low because it changes every day. Like I honestly have no idea what is going to happen. So I don't know. I do want to answer this one because it's kind of tied in, right? From Bubs. It says hard to imagine they would cut a scholarship player. I got to disagree with you on that one. Because if as a coach or as a GM now, right? If I'm looking at the roster, okay, and I'm not necessarily thinking of anybody in particular, but if I'm looking at the 15th offensive lineman who's on scholarship, okay, and I'm looking at a guy like Justin Fisher, okay, just as an example, Justin Fisher's a walk-on. That kid would be a scholarship player. I would cut that kid and keep a guy like Justin Fisher because he's a guy that can run down on kickoff. He can be on kickoff return. He can be a special teams guy that we're counting on, whereas the 15th offensive lineman, who is maybe a junior at this point, is not going to help the team. So I would cut that scholarship player over this walk-on in that particular kind of a situation. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So there's walk-ons that are more valuable than scholarship players is the point that I'm making.
Yeah, I get your point, but we're also really only talking about 15 guys getting cut potentially,
Correct.
Like above the 105. Like that's Notre Dame's roster last year was somewhere between 115 and 120. I remember counting it at one point. So we're talking about 15 guys. So, I mean, I get your point. Like Fisher, as an example, was a preferred walk-on, and he does a lot of different stuff now. Like, to me, not even maybe necessarily, like the 15th offensive lineman, but, like a guy who's been in the program for already 5 or maybe even going on a 6th year, depending on like medical status or those kind of things, like what is he ultimately going to be able, to bring to the program if he hasn't, been a significant contributor to some extent already, like
that's what I'm
just
saying.
Like we've seen those guys. Notre Dame has essentially kind of, moved them off the roster the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. It's like, like they're not on the team, like they've medically retired or, whatever you want to term it, but their scholarship is still honored. They're still getting their school paid for. They can finish their degree at Notre Dame and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And those are hard, that's why these are hard discussions, right? That's why these are hard decisions. It's why, these conversations are being had because they're hard. You don't want to have to cut anybody, even at the high school level. When you have to cut, it sucks. And we're not dealing with scholarships and, affecting guys' futures and things like that. So, those conversations are tough, but you got to do at the end of the day, what's best for your team. And here's the other thing, if they're going to cut a kid, they're going to do it before, well, again, all the turmoil with the 105 and everything and the portal closing and I get all that, but you're going to try to put that kid in the best position possible to go play someplace else if that's what they want to do. I mean, you're not just going to be like, sorry, you're cut. Good luck in your life. Like that's not what Notre Dame is going to do. Like you said, they're going to allow them to either finish up at Notre Dame or they will help them get a spot someplace else to the best of their ability at maybe, a lower level.
And this is a situation where, there's like even with the 85-man scholarship limit, obviously every year rolls around and people start wringing their hands. Oh, they're at 88. What are they going to do to get to 85? Trust me, it's going to work out. And there'll be some of that, but you're not going to be literally having to cut players every year once they finally,
because then your roster management is set at 105. I mean, it's like it's as a for example, right? So my kid's going to Hillsdale. He caps his roster at like 120. You want to know why he caps his roster at 120? Because that's how many lockers they have. You know what I mean? But that, like, they know that's the number, and that's what they do.
We got 120 lockers. We're not going above that.
So it was funny. I mean, that's literally what he told me. Because I asked him, how, what's your roster size and all that? Because they don't have limits in the D2 level. And so once you know what your limit is, you operate like that. You know what I mean? And so whether it's 120, 105, you operate in that window and they'll be fine.
DJ, thanks for that super chat. He says, can we stop calling it the NCAA and call it the SEC?
I mean, you're not wrong.
10? I mean,
you're not wrong.
It's the way
DJ.
Obviously things are trending right now. So,
yeah. So we'll see how it all plans out. I mean, it is looking like it's going to, maybe the 105 is not going to happen for this year. And I think that's a smart decision, to be perfectly honest with you. Allows those guys to kind of transition and figure some things out. Because it is a very abrupt change, right? I mean, it is. And that's not fair to a lot of guys on rosters and things like that. It's just not.
Andre wants to know, do you think we have too many playoff teams?
Ooh, man. I was against the expansion of the playoff. I will say that. But man, was it awesome last year.
But after seeing Notre Dame go to the championship game, you have a completely different opinion now, don't you?
And I have a completely different opinion because, you know, I experienced Notre Dame and IU on camp. Like, that was the most electric atmosphere that I've ever been a part of as a media member or even as a fan. You know what I mean? And if you can replicate that year in and year out, sign me up. You know what I mean? Like, I would even want maybe another round at home. I just think that was such an awesome atmosphere. Yes, it helped that Notre Dame won, obviously, but it was such an electric atmosphere. Even IU fans thought they had a chance at beating Notre Dame. And so they, you know, brought it and it was awesome, you know? So I'm all for it now. I know it's going to get bigger. I get it. I don't necessarily would like that plan either, but
that's the thing. If you think it's too many now, just wait for a couple of years because it's going to expand again. Whether it's 14 or 16, it's going to expand again. I liked it. I like the fact that we have multiple rounds of the playoffs, that it's not just the top 4 teams, that we got different teams in the playoff this year. You know, Justin is saying those first round games weren't competitive, though. That's not going to happen every year. And, you know, like, it's still about the fact that, you know, like you said, the fact that you were able to play playoff games, meaningful games on campus sites in December is pretty awesome. And like, you know, to be in that's pretty awesome as well. Now, I think the biggest tweak is just going to be changing, you know, like the bye
seeding and
formula.
how that works.
Yeah. And like that'll take care of some of this as well, because I just don't think that because you had some lopsided games this year means that that's going to happen every year. It just worked out that way this year.
Yeah. You know, there weren't any upsets in the first round. Like, I get that, but that's also home field advantage. Like, that's kind of part of it. And eventually that will change. There's going to be some away team that comes in and wins that game. But, you know, every team that got a bye lost this year. That's not going to happen every year either. You know, so they just need to tweak it and adjust it. I'm not a fan of going to 16. We'll see what that actually looks like once they do it. But it was fun, man. Like, trying to plan out and, okay, you know, there's a home game and then you're going to New Orleans and then you're going to Miami. And
wasn't it cool? You know, we usually wait until New Year's Day or right around there for like the New Year's 6 bowls. And then, you know, you had obviously 2 semifinals and a championship game at January. Wasn't it cool having multiple rounds, like multiple weeks to occupy your time with the playoffs? Awesome. You know, obviously I realize there are people who don't want college football to resemble the NFL, but the NFL has multiple weeks of playoffs, and guess what? Those are compelling games. And sometimes they end up in blowouts, you know, it happens regardless of what sport you happen to play. Sometimes in the first round or the second round of a Major League Baseball playoff game, you end up with a series sweep. You know, it happens from time to time, but I think it's great. Like,
I do too. And again, you're going to see teams in the 12-teamer or the 14 or whatever number it's going to end up being. You're going to see teams in there that you don't normally see. An IU, a Boise State, right? You're going to see teams in there. You're going to see teams back in, like Clemson, right? You're going to see opportunities for other teams. And eventually, someday, one of those type of teams is going to make a run. You know what I mean? And then it's going to be awesome, right? Because it's going to be an underdog. As long as your team's not the one that gets, you know, upset, it's going to be awesome to watch a team like that kind of play on every week. Like, Are you kidding me? If IU would have beaten Notre Dame and then let's say they go and beat Georgia or something like that, like half the country would have been IU fans, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
For sure.
It would have been a great thing to follow. That'll happen eventually. Didn't happen this year, obviously, but I think eventually it will. That will happen. It'll just be fewer and far between.
I am Tenzin. I am the son of Ang. Asks, so what else is needed for you to see 16-0 to be inevitable? I'm sure he's talking about Notre Dame. I would at least like to see whoever the quarterback is play a game.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Before we rush to 16-0. I would like to see that.
Yeah. Look, I don't care what team it is. 16-0 is never inevitable. Okay. Like I will never predict that a team is going to go 16-0. Could it be possible? Could it happen? Sure.
It's a lot of games.
That's a lot of games, man. And a lot of things can happen. Like if you watch Notre Dame play in any game last year, except the NIU game, would you have ever predicted that they would lose to NIU? You know what I mean? Or if you would have even watched NIU play in every game that they played outside of the Notre Dame game, would you ever think that they had a chance of beating Notre Dame? Because they were an average football team. In the MAC, they were an average football team. It's just on that day, in that moment, they got the best of Notre Dame. That's football, man. Specifically, that's college football. And so I will never think 16-0 is inevitable. Now,
I mean, you would have settled for 15-1, right?
Like, absolutely.
Did it need to be 16-0? You would have taken 15-1.
Correct. I would have absolutely taken 15-1 last year. Yes.
Not just you. Everybody
yes.
who's in here would have taken that.
No doubt. Now, to the base of the question, what do we need to see? Look, at the end of the day, you need a high-level quarterback to win a national championship. And I think Notre Dame is in that wheelhouse now. To your point, Sean, we need to see it, in a game, obviously. But I think a championship level quarterback is the number one ingredient that you need. Now you need other things. You need a good defense. You need a good running game. Like there's other things that you need, but I think it all starts with a championship level quarterback. And I think Notre Dame is finally there. And hopefully they can continue that trend because guess what? Good players want to play with good players. That has always been the case. And if you've got a championship level defense like Notre Dame has had for quite some time, now you pair it up with a championship level quarterback. Now you're talking about
game changer,
a situation where you can win. So I think we're seeing it, to be perfectly honest with you. I think we're seeing it, but I'm not going to predict 16-0. Like there's just too many things that can go wrong.
By the way, Tenzin, son of Ang, he asked the position group rankings 1 through 10. That's a show. That is on my list. That's a show that we'll be doing relatively soon.
Perfect.
So we're not just going to speed through it in 2 minutes.
Yeah. And look, Notre Dame's not done. We don't know what the final roster is going to be at this point. So I'm not comfortable answering that question right now on April 24th. In a couple of weeks, once we kind of know what the roster is going to look like, let's have a conversation. You know what I mean? But until then, let's see how this thing kind of shakes out.
Joe M., if you two, respectively, had a chance to change one thing in order to improve the stadium game day atmosphere about the rules and regulations that Notre Dame Stadium has for game day, what would it be?
This is easy for me. Easy for me.
What's that?
You fire those girls that get on the mic. Fire them.
I was going to be nice, but that is the first thing that popped into my head.
That's so annoying.
They've got new ones, and they're all just more annoying in different ways.
Gosh, it's awful, man. And I'm not even blaming the girls because clearly they're told what to do and how to act. Because they're all the same. They're like all carbon copies of each other.
Yes, they all sound like this, and they talk like this. Hey, by the way, you have a microphone. You don't necessarily need to yell. If you just project into the microphone, that's
correct.
All you need to do.
This is correct.
Don't have to yell into it.
It's just, you don't need to engage the fan base in the stadium in that manner. Like, I want to see more video production during those timeouts. Like the one time they did like The Office, like a little thing, or like give me more video and less, annoying girl with a microphone.
Salty is saying much less Jumbotron and much more band. I don't think they're going back to more band. There's some old school people who over these last several years, since they've kind of not phased out, but is that the word? Maybe phased out a little bit. The band, like there's less band and more, rock music, rap music, hip hop, whatever. Over the loudspeakers.
I'm a fan of the band. I like the band. I wouldn't mind a little bit more band, but I don't know that that's ever going to happen.
If you want a modern roster, you have to do more modern things inside the stadium.
Accurate. The other thing I would do, Sean, this is just kind of coming into my brain. Every time they score a touchdown, I want fireworks. I want some stadium atmosphere.
I like that.
Every time they score.
Brian says sell beer. Well, that's coming.
That's here. We're there. We're there. Now they always sold beer behind those secret double doors, in the press box.
Mm-hmm.
There was always alky over there.
Right. But not out in the stadium.
Yes, not in the stadium. You got to be
because
rich.
Those people are paying a lot more for those tickets.
This is accurate. Yes, absolutely accurate.
I mean, other than that, I can't really think of anything else. There are times when it gets a little, quiet during the breaks and stuff like that.
Which I get. I mean,
talking about the chemistry class or the chemistry program or whatever on the jumbo.
And that's never going to change because it's Notre Dame, and they, you gotta teach like a champion and all those different things. Like that's always going to be there. And I honestly don't mind that because it doesn't need to be rowdy during a 3.5 minute commercial break. But I'm going to need everybody to get back to the rowdiness once it comes back. You know what I'm saying? And the ladies on the mic aren't making that happen. So. And they need to get rid of the little kids saying, hit it, band, or whatever they say before, in the middle of the third quarter. Like, that's played out. We're good now. It's time to move on to something else.
Oh, man. Irish English, another big wrestling fan. Using the Notre Dame football roster weights, who would you pick if you were forming a wrestling team at 184, 197, and 285?
Man, where do you get those weights? Those are those old school weights? Those aren't the weights they're using now. I know that much.
Are they college weights, though?
Well, maybe. That's a good point. I guess I'm thinking high school.
Man, let me see. Let's go through.
I'm ordering them by weight. So
yeah, that's what I did as well. We got 184, 197, 285.
184. I'm going.
I mean, I don't know like everyone who's been on a wrestling team. Well, Faison's listed at 184.
Yeah.
So just as good an athlete as he is.
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
I would probably put him there.
Was it 197's next?
197.
I'm gonna go down the page. There's only one guy left.
I would go Aeneas Williams because he's 201. He's only got to lose 4 pounds.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, run a little bit the night before the match, and he's right there.
You know what? Jadarian Price is only a 202. That'd be a heck of a what do they call the challenge match for who's going to win that one? You know what I mean?
Wrestle off,
yeah. That could be fun. Now you're going 280. We're going heavyweight.
285. Let's see.
You're getting into O line and a D lineman.
I think Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp are interesting. They're both like 10 pounds above that, but again, that's doable as far as dropping 10 pounds to get down to weight. Donovan Heinisch.
That's where I was going to go. I was going to
Donovan Heinisch there.
Because he's listed at 280.
Yeah.
I would
eat a couple burgers and he'll be fine.
Yeah, he's scrappy, man.
No salads for him.
He would be one of those athletic heavyweights. You know what I mean? Like you.
Forgot about Jagasaw. What's he weigh? Because he was a wrestler, state champion wrestler, but he might have to drop too much weight to get down to that.
He's at 320.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah,
that he's gonna have to lose. That's a lot.
I am Tenzin says it's just water weight. It's very true, but. I think those are good picks.
Yeah.
I like those.
Yeah. Well, if they ever want to bring the wrestling team back at Notre Dame.
Not seeing that happening anytime
don't
soon.
Either.
Bubs says, do you think Armel Mukum or some other young defensive tackle that hasn't played much will have a consistent role in the defense this year?
Man, that's tough. I know they're going to go, their plan is to, have more of a rotation especially on the interior of the defense, right? A guy who hasn't played that much.
I think it's going to be tough, because they brought in the 2 transfers, and you've got Onye back, and you've got Heinisch. So that's 4 guys right there. Like, I was kind of, and again, we didn't get to see a whole lot, but I was hoping to see, kind of maybe a little bit of a rise from either a guy like Mukum or Sevillano. As 2 examples of those young guys who had an opportunity. We didn't see that this spring. So as of right now, I think they're both going to have opportunities, but you also don't bring in 2 transfer defensive tackles who've got multiple years of eligibility left if you're counting on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. Mark wants to know, are you going to watch the new season of Star Wars Andor? Critics say it's better than most of the Star Wars movies. I can't remember. Are you a Star Wars guy?
I like Star Wars, but I will say over like the last decade or so, there's been so many like offshoots and series, and I can't keep it all straight. I don't know. Is it a prequel? Is it an alternate universe? Is it like, I don't mind Star Wars. I really don't. I never got into Mandalorian. Which I've heard is amazing. I don't know. It's too complicated. I don't have too much going on for me to really figure it all out, if I'm being honest. I know that maybe that's a cop-out because I have heard that this new one is actually really, really good. But like, it's a prequel, I think is what I understand. Like how are we going? I don't know. It's a lot. I don't know.
I am not in on any Star Wars stuff.
Okay.
I have not watched anything since, what was it, Return of the Jedi? Like, I haven't watched any of the new stuff.
I've seen all 9 of
the 70s and early 80s are the only Star Wars.
Okay.
Like, Harrison Ford, Luke Hamill, Carrie Fisher, that whole crew.
Well, they were in the most recent one too.
Well, I'm talking about young.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Millennium Falcon. Is a Millennium Falcon still, like buzzing around in any of these? Is it?
Okay. Yeah, it was in the movies, right? It was in the most recent movie.
Okay.
But again, the offshoot stuff, I just can't keep it straight, man. I just can't keep it all straight. So I apologize to all the Star Wars fanatics out there. I just don't know. What I need is like a flow chart, like a visual, like here is a timeline. This is when this series takes place. This is when this movie takes place. That kind of stuff. That's what I need.
Christopher wants to go back to the scholarship talk. If we're moving down in scholarships, who does it affect more? Power 4, Group of 5, or the lower division?
All of the above. It's a domino effect.
It impacts them in different ways.
Right.
But like, I think everything below Power 4 is going to benefit because you're going to have guys who are moving off Power 4 rosters and you're going to get trickle down, but it's basically just going to keep pushing everybody down a level potentially because of the fact that there are going to be limits and there are going to be some guys who end up not playing football at all as a result.
I think you're going to see guys obviously Power 4 go to Group of 5. And you're going to see Group of 5 going to 1AA, and you're going to see some 1AA and Group of 5 go down to the D2 level. After that, I think there's like kind of a chasm between D2 and then when you get down to D3 and NAIA, because D3 and NAIA, it's just a little bit different than the way D2s and above operate. You know what I mean? Like D3 and NAIA, a lot of those teams are supporting the university by getting guys on the roster. You know what I mean? And so you
get as many guys on the roster as you can because you qualify
yes.
for some academic, but not everything. Correct. And so guys are paying their way.
Yes.
And that's why so many of these NAIA programs that didn't used to have football have added it. And it's why they've also added wrestling as
Right.
a lot of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot more wrestling at these lower levels
Yep.
than there used to be several years ago.
Right.
And it's the same thing. Guys want an opportunity. Division
Sure.
I programs are cutting wrestling, so you add it at these lower levels. Guys want to do it. They're willing to
Yeah.
pay and they go participate. And
Yep.
it's the same with football as well.
So I think you're going to see an uptick in talent at the, the Power 5, 1AA and Division II levels. And then I don't think it's going to change a whole lot at the Division III and NAIA level, because I just think they're fishing in a different pond. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But we'll see. Time will tell, obviously, on all of that kind of stuff. But I think you're going to see movement within those top tiers, because the transfer portal is still a thing. The D2, 1AA, all of that. So you're going to see some movement in that neighborhood as well, which I think is going to be kind of fascinating to see too.
Kevin, without a question but a comment, he says people are freaking out about men's and women's basketball. They should check out Baylor men's basketball. They lost their entire roster. And I think that there was at least another program that was pretty close to that. Oof. And UCLA on the women's side just went to the Final Four. They lost their entire freshman class. They lost 6 players from a team that went to the Final Four. So it's like there were over on the women's side alone, there were over 1,500 players who entered the portal. There are roughly still 1,000 who are in the portal but haven't committed yet. And there were only 25 schools, women's basketball, that did not have a player enter the portal. And most of them are, interestingly, Oregon State is one of those. But Oregon State last year,
they lost everybody.
They lost everything because of the fact that they, the Pac-12 imploded. And so all the best players on Oregon State's team went all over the place.
Yeah.
So
it's the wild, wild west, man. And this is why I think, in my opinion, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but this is why I don't think you're going to see a whole lot more of the George Masons of the world and these teams make a run.
I don't think there's any chance you can anymore.
Yeah, because those teams that were together for 4 or 5 years, who, that's why they were good in the tournament, those guys are bailing early because they're going to cash in, and the bigger schools are going to be poaching guys from those rosters. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to see the old school together for 3 or 4 or 5 years making a run. It's just not going to happen anymore. And in my opinion, that makes the tournament less exciting.
I agree. I think that this was one of the duller men's basketball tournaments ever. And it's because the biggest Cinderella was a 10-seeder to Arkansas with John Calipari as the head coach.
It's the best team money can buy.
Yeah.
And they're the Cinderella of the tournament. That was boring to me. You know, I'm sorry. John Calipari is not allowed to be a Cinderella.
That's all the mid-majors. Yeah. Right. I mean, like you said, all the mid-majors, guys get good and they jump into the portal for the chance to go play someplace else.
Right.
Now, I mean, you can't blame them.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
It's just not good for that level of basketball.
Yeah, I don't blame those guys at all.
Yeah.
At all. But they've got no incentive to stick around. And those smaller schools are not going to have the NIL to keep those guys around.
Exactly. Salty wants to know, has the time come for the new Champions Lounge to be renamed the Champions Lounge and the older one to be named the Old Champions Lounge?
That's a question for somebody else.
Yeah, not us.
Nope. You and I do not have any kind of power.
I mean, it sounds like solid rationale, but
it
that is way above our pay grade.
So far above. So far above. My passwords do not allow for me to make changes like that, nor do I want him to.
How much has Vernon's injury hampered his efforts to rise on the depth chart?
I think legitimately. Remember when he came in as a freshman? I mean, we all looked at him like, holy crap, that's an early enrollee freshman. He was, his arms were huge. We thought that he was going to see playing time early on in his career, and injuries have just absolutely killed him. So that injuries have absolutely hampered his efforts to rise in the depth chart. Absolutely 100%. 100%. Where this is a crucial year for him, in my opinion, because if he doesn't get to a certain spot on the depth chart, I think you're going to see his name in the portal someday, or maybe just hanging it up. I don't know. I don't know him at all. But time is fleeting.
MCL does not help anything either. And, so he's going to be out for a little bit. Hopefully he's able to get healthy, but the injuries definitely have not helped Brennan Byrne.
Yeah.
Concerned about the progress of Cam Williams?
Not concerned, because clearly the staff is still high on him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been playing as much as he even was in the spring. Obviously still needs to work on his consistency. No question. I think that he still can kind of fly under the radar this season, but then next season is his year of atonement. You know what I mean? I think they've got enough pieces this year where they're not going to have to count on him, and maybe he can breach the rotation to a degree, like that kind of a season. And I think that would be okay. And then 26 is his breakout year. But if that doesn't happen, then, the concern obviously is at all-time high.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not concerned, but because there's still plenty of time for him. But the C word is the thing for him: consistency. That's basically what it is. And we saw it in the opportunities that we got to see it this spring. He just needs to flat out be more consistent, catch the ball more, starting with that much more consistently. But he, again, he's still young enough that there's time for him, even over the course of this season, to make it, or, even into training camp to make a dent.
Right. Exactly.
I wouldn't put it at the concern level just yet.
Yep. Agreed. He's still, I know he came in with a lot of accolades. He's a 5-star, all of those things. And those things are all real. But the reality is he's still a rising sophomore. There's still time. There's still meat on the bone. And I don't want to get crazy worried about Cam Williams yet.
Which IB members are on your Mount Rushmore, and why did you leave Salty off? I mean, we can't even create a Mount Rushmore. We're just going to offend everybody if we start going in that direction.
Not going anywhere near that one.
Nope.
No. You and I are both members on the board, so I'm going to put us up there.
We'll just go with that. So Salty's asking about switching one player from defense to offense and one from offense to defense.
This is college football, man. That doesn't really happen a whole lot. And I say that obviously knowing that they moved a defensive lineman to offensive line this year. But that's not a normal thing. I'm
just going to cop out and say, but I think that the way they're recruiting and the way they're targeting guys, they know what they're getting. And so I don't think that we're going to see a whole lot of this anymore.
I mean, the obvious, one that we've seen most recently is Xavier Watts. That's an obvious one. And a lot of these guys have played both sides of the ball in high school. But for example, and I know he's not on the roster anymore, but Jet Kaiser was a quarterback, a triple option quarterback, and a linebacker, and all.
Great athlete, just all over the place.
He is not built to be a quarterback anymore. You know what I mean? He's not built to be a running back anymore. He built himself into a linebacker. He's physically a linebacker. You know what I mean? So a lot of these guys would have to severely change their body style in order to play on one or the other side of the ball, right? So yeah, I think I'm copping out on this one as well.
I just, Greathouse maybe would make a good safety.
Okay.
I'm not saying I would.
Wouldn't mind throwing Jadon Blair like a corner fade in the end zone. He's super tall and long. Could see that, I suppose. So there you go. I answered Salty.
Should 2027 quarterback recruiting target Brady Quinn come to Notre Dame, or would his name be too similar to a previous Notre Dame quarterback for comfort?
Well, at the moment, he's not good enough to come to Notre Dame, my personal opinion. So if he would be...
So, that answers your question.
His
name has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, right. Here's the thing, though. If he was a legit 5-star quarterback, I don't care what his name is, you bring him in, right? that is not the case in this particular situation. And Notre Dame is not going to offer him just because of his name, right? They don't need the publicity. But if he's like a borderline like recruit and, they bring him in, it's like, I don't know that if I was his dad, I'd be like, you know what? I don't think that's a great idea because I don't know that you're going to be able to live up to those expectations. And that is just asking for disaster. So, like I said, unless he's a 5-star can't miss kind of a guy, I would steer him to another spot.
I agree. I can't disagree with that logic. Salty says Bowen rushed for 1,800 yards.
Okay.
Right. A lot of these guys played both ways in high
Right.
school. It's
Right.
like when you're that good, most of them did. So there's just none that I think like no one's buried enough, that it would make sense to move it. Like that's when it usually happens, like you get buried on the depth chart or
Sure.
you're lacking at one position. Again, I just feel like the recruiting is good enough that why would you need to? And, it's like your running back room is good enough. It's not like you need Drake Bowen.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, Drake Bowen was doing it against, 2A competition in Indiana.
True.
You know what I mean? So it's a little bit different. Notre Dame and, 2A Andrean.
I am Tenzin. The biggest Cubs concern as we get deeper into the season sure appears to me to be the bullpen.
I was just going to say, Jesse tells me all the time that it's the bullpen. And then the offense just kind of rescues them every single game. It feels like, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's the bullpen. They need to shore up the bullpen. If they can shore up the bullpen, man, they just swept the Dodgers. And at the end of last night's game, they got Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani out as the last 2 outs of the game. Like you want to talk about, and I think it was a 1-run game. That's how you do it, man. Like that's pretty fun to watch. That's pretty fun to watch. It's April. I am not getting my hopes up, but this is a fun team to watch.
Solid team so far. I've only watched a little bit of the Cubs.
Who knew, Sean Stiers, that the game that I'm going to go to first weekend of June, Cubs, Tigers, Detroit Tigers, they're both in first place right now.
Wow.
If somehow that can hang on to be a reality in the first weekend of June would be unbelievable on both sides, like Cubs and Tigers,
Yeah.
My father-in-law is already talking about 1984. So there you go.
I think Jesse's actually talking about going to a game that weekend as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, we're going on Sunday.
I don't know what day he's talking about because I'm actually taking a little short vacation, like long weekend that weekend. Last weekend of May, first day of June.
Oh, ours is the following week.
It's the following week.
Yeah, so like the first full week. So it's the 8th is when we're going.
Gotcha.
So it's like a graduation gift for my kid. He's graduating the next day. So
Christopher wants to know who the Cowboys are drafting in the first round. And
what do you got?
Where
are they in the draft?
They are number 12.
Okay.
2 spots after the Bears.
Sounds like Shadur Sanders to me.
It feels, yeah. It feels like wide receiver to me. It feels like either McMillan from Arizona, if you want a bigger guy, or Golden from Texas, if you want a smaller, speedy guy. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not completely sold on wide receiver. I wish that there was a way that Ashton Genty was going to be there. There's no way he can. The only way they're going to get him, I think, is if they trade up. Jesse and I were talking last night. Maybe it's an offensive lineman.
Apparently the Bears are talking trade if he's still on the board. I don't know if you've seen any of that. So we'll see how it goes. Apparently they have Genty circled as somebody that they want.
I think everybody wants Genty right now.
Do.
All the mocks that I've seen in the last 2 days now have Genty. Instead of going to the Raiders, they've got him going to Jacksonville now. So I don't know. All right, Vince, we've come to that time where I ask you, are you ready for rapid fire?
Oh, let's go. I'm ready. Ready.
All right.
Ready.
So fill in the blank. Steve Angeli signing with Syracuse is blank.
Is stomach filling. is what it is. I'm going to keep coming back to it. I think it's honestly, from a football standpoint, it's an interesting choice because the offense that Syracuse runs, I don't know that really fits who Steve Angeli is, right? There are other teams I think that fit his skill set better. I know there's some personal connections there, and I get that, and that's recruiting, right? That's part of it. I totally understand that, and maybe they're going to adjust their offense and all of those different things. But as it stands, the offense that they ran last year, I don't think fits his skill set that well, to be perfectly honest. So it's an interesting choice. I get it. I understand it. But I don't know how successful it's going to be.
Yeah, my first thought when I saw this was exactly the same as yours. We are getting free food now from Jesse because he was, not wise enough to make the bet with us that the whole bet, if you missed it, was Jesse was digging his heels in that Steve Angeli was not going to go to a Power 4 team. So here he is. He makes one visit, and just a little bit more than a week later, he's playing for Syracuse. So we're very happy. Jesse owes both Vince and I dinner. So we're very excited about that. From a football standpoint, I mean, he's just leaving one quarterback competition and jumping in to another one. He's going to have to go compete for a job at Syracuse. There are no guarantees that he's going to end up the starting quarterback. Now, I guess you could say that about any place that you go, but Syracuse has got the LSU transfer, and that's who he's going to be competing with. So I think it's an interesting choice. But again, obviously the relationship that he had with the former high school coach must have gone a long way in this whole thing. And that's what Brian wants to know. Will Angeli beat out Collins, the 4-star LSU transfer? That is the golden question. They are now going to battle in fall training camp for that job. I don't think Angeli's just going to be handed the job by any means.
Do you want to do the early look at the Syracuse schedule? Because it is not a cakewalk, Sean Stiers.
Let's do it.
There are 6 losses on there potentially, but let's roll through it. Let's see what we can do here. So they open up on the road the day before Notre Dame kicks off their schedule on August 30th down at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So neutral site against the Tennessee Volunteers. That's an L. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to find the schedule so I can actually see it as well. So sorry.
No, I was trying to go over every possible, detail about that game because I knew you were looking. But opening up against
Tennessee, not a great place to start. Not a great place to start.
No. Now, then they got 2 kind of layup games. They got UConn and Colgate.
UConn's getting better, though.
I
wouldn't just write that off by any means.
I will put it in the win column for now. So that makes them 2-1 coming out of week 3. Then they go on the road to Clemson. And if Cade Klubnik is everything that these Heisman voters or Heisman odds prognosticators think he's going to be, I think that's a loss. So now they're 2-2. What say you at this point?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I didn't realize we were predicting the whole thing, but okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what we were doing. All right, we can go faster. So home against Duke.
Yep. I'll say I'll give them credit for a win against Duke.
Cool. So they're 3-2. SMU at SMU.
A playoff team from a year ago on the road. I'm going to take the Mustangs.
I am as well. So they are now 500 again. Pitt at home.
Kind of a toss-up game. Remember Pitt started off like what, 8-0, 9-0 last year before they just fell completely off the wagon at the end. But they're going to have a first time. I guess the guy that they had, I think he was a freshman this past season, and he got hurt. Kind of another toss-up. I'll give it to the home team. I'll say they'll beat Pittsburgh.
Okay, 1 game over. Georgia Tech
at Georgia Tech.
Yep.
I'll say loss.
Okay, so back to 500. North Carolina at home. The Fighting Bill Belichick.
Yeah, what's the Belichick Tar Heels?
Yeah, I know. Seriously, like? And that's on Halloween.
Mm.
It's a Friday
I don't know.
night.
I have no idea how to pick.
I know. I agree with you. And then at Miami, at the Rock.
I'll say loss.
So let's say we'll give them the win in North Carolina. We'll give them a loss at Miami. I think we're back to 500. Then you got Notre Dame at Notre Dame.
Loss.
I think we can all agree on that. And then Boston College at home.
I'm going to say loss in that one as well.
That means they're 2 games under 500, according to you.
Okay.
5-7.
Are you in that ballpark?
Yeah. I said 6-6 maybe. But that's a tough schedule. That's a tough schedule. So they better figure it out real quick.
DK says, why would Syracuse bring Angeli in if Collins was that great? I'm not saying Collins is that great, but obviously you bring him in to have depth in the quarterback room. That's what Notre Dame had, was great depth in the quarterback room, and that's what Syracuse lacks. I mean, you lose Cal McCord, and now you've got basically, Collins had minimal snaps as well in his time at LSU. You bring him in to compete for the job, basically. I'm not saying Angeli is definitely losing to Collins. I'm just saying he's in a quarterback battle, which is what he was in when he was here at Notre Dame. So he's still in a quarterback battle by going to Syracuse. I'm not saying he's going to win. I'm not saying he's going to lose. I'm just saying he's in a quarterback battle, and it's not a given that he's going to be the starter.
And I'm not going to claim that I know all about Syracuse's roster. Okay. How much can Steve elevate that roster? I think that remains to be seen. He's a good leader. He's a great locker room guy. He has all of those intangibles, which I think is awesome. How much can he elevate that entire team? I don't know anything about Syracuse's defense, right? Is it going to be a shootout in every game? I don't know the answer to that. Do they have a really good defense where they have to average 21 points and they're going to win a bunch of games? I don't know. But from what I know about the teams that they're going to play, that's a tough schedule. That's all I'm saying. That is not a cakewalk schedule.
Not easy by any means.
Yeah.
So Marcus Freeman was asked at his press conference yesterday about the ceiling for his team in 2025, and here's his answer.
I think I've matured a little bit since last year, where I made the comments of this is the most talented team I've been a this is again, this is I really like this team that we put together and that we have, and I think it has a lot of potential. We have to expedite that elevation to reaching our full potential, but outcomes are driven from a lot of different things. The outcomes of a game, right? And the ability to say you won or lost a game. There's so many things that determine that. But when you talk about this team being a really good football team, we definitely have the ability to do that. We just got to continue to develop. And we'll see what the outcomes are, right? Like, if you would ask me after week 2 last year, what's the outlook of this season? I'm just trying to get ready for week 3, but we'll let the outcomes kind of happen when we get to the season. But I do believe we have a high ceiling, and we just got to continue to elevate to reaching that level that we aspire to reach.
So no bold proclamations, didn't want to make any exclamations there, Vince. What do you think is the ceiling for this team, and or any, thoughts on what you just heard from Marcus Freeman there?
Well, the ceiling is the best, right? That's the best that they could do. The ceiling's the national championship. It has to be. I think, and that's not saying they're going to win the national championship. That's saying that's what the ceiling is, right?
Yeah, I think this team has a legit chance to, at a minimum, be in the college football playoff.
That's
and just like last year, advance in the playoff and win the national championship. I think that's absolutely the ceiling.
And I feel like, with the way things are trending from a roster standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, I think every year you should go into the season with the floor being the playoff and the ceiling being a national championship. Like that's who Notre Dame aspires to be.
So is that what you're saying the floor is then? Just being in the playoff?
Yeah, that's the floor. Yeah, absolutely. I think
to me it's like 10-2 and you're on the bubble.
You're in the conversation.
Yeah.
To go at the end of the season.
Yeah.
That's fair. Because you're not going to make the playoff every year. Like that's an unrealistic goal. You're just not, you can think that, but you're just not. So, okay, I could see that. So we'll drop the floor just a skosh. But I think they should absolutely be in the discussion every year.
Joe says he thinks Marcus Freeman thinks they can do it. I think you're right, but he just doesn't want to come out and say it right now at the end of spring practice.
That's absolutely fair too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, they just played in the national championship game, and there's every argument that the roster is even better
Correct.
this year in 2025 than it was in 2024.
And that's the thing when you're talking about a ceiling, like if that team last year can go to the national championship game, then the ceiling for this team should be the national championship game, if not winning that game. You know what I mean? Like that's just realistic. It's not like we're sitting here and we're USC talking about a terrible, I saw what's his name, the podcast are talking about USC. I can't remember with the guy that wears the tight t-shirts.
The blonde guy, JD.
I don't think it's JD. It's not Class.
Oh, the bald guy. The bald
guy who always wears the tight shirts and stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. He picked Notre Dame to lose every game last year, basically.
Hey,
that guy.
Pate.
Yeah, Josh Pate. Thank you. He did I listened to him talk about USC because apparently he went there and he was in the building and whatever. And he's like, this team, is not talking like a team that went 5-7 last year or whatever it was that they went. This team is talking like national champions and blah, 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 blah. And they have a national championship attitude. Like, where's the foundation for that attitude? You know what I mean? Like, he's like, Lincoln Riley's been there to the playoff, and Chad Bowden was just in the national championship. So that's the attitude and blah, blah, blah. But like, that's the attitude at Notre Dame too, because they were actually in that game last year. You know what? That's the difference.
Right.
That's the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Bowden is taking, this unearned swagger with him to USC. And it's like, talk is cheap, baby. And that's why Marcus Freeman's not saying anything right now, because talk is cheap. None of that. Like, it's great that they have an attitude, but again, it's spring. Okay. Correct. So like, if you don't have a great attitude in spring, there'd be much worse problems, like how far does that go into the season when you're getting your brains beat in again because your offensive line and your defensive line are not competitive, not compatible to being in the Big Ten. We'll see. I would hope that they would have a great attitude. Notre Dame should, because like Vince said, they just played in the freaking national championship game.
They should be very confident in what they can do. Very confident,
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a good starting point, Tom, if USC can prove they can win a Big Ten road game.
Right.
Just one.
That's great, Tom. That's well played, sir. Well played.
Great starting point.
Yeah.
So Freeman also said yesterday that Gerby Lambert will work this summer to try to get back to full activities after having shoulder labrum surgery this spring. Father David asked on the Champions Lounge yesterday if Lambert will have enough time in the fall to press for an opening day starting tackle position, or if that's too much to come back from in that short amount of time. So what do you think is realistic for Lambert, both in fall camp and this season, Vince?
I mean, I so want him to be competitive in this race that, I got to be careful with my, quote unquote prediction here. Right. So, because I want it so bad, that's my problem. I think, depending on when in the summer that he can get back, like the biggest issue is going to be, hitting the weight room and things like that. Cause a shoulder injury, you're not able to.
That's exactly it.
So when is he
bench
able
press,
to come
by
back?
the way, is not good for your shoulders.
Correct.
I don't know if people knew that, but that's actually
right.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But you also need to bench a lot to be strong and
and he needs
contact.
And he needs to have a strong upper body. I mean, that was basically what he was quote unquote lacking, besides understanding everything and all of that. Like, he just needs to bulk up a little bit, right? So that part worries me a little bit. So it really all depends on when he comes back. I mean, if he's just stepping foot on the practice field the first day of fall camp without any kind of off-season conditioning and stuff like that, then that's going to be really tough. If he's got a month before that, then I give him a shot for competing. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I just, like you, I think it's going to be rough for him to be able to compete for a spot during camp because of the strength. I can't see him getting close to, having, even 80, maybe 80% strength during fall training camp like that could still be pushing it,
Yeah.
70%, 80%, whatever. But as the season goes on, if he gets back to full strength, I think he should be one of the top 7 linemen
Right.
on the team. And, like Andrew was talking about Styles Prescott, and he would be in that conversation as well. But, I would have Sullivan Absher in there, like it feels like Absher is probably,
I just don't know what position they're going to play him at.
well, I was going to say, like
Yeah.
for the interior positions, it feels like he could be the number 2 at any of the interior positions. And then for the tackles, obviously you've got Wagner, Knapp, and then, again, is Lambert healthy? And then you've got Prescott in that conversation. And we still don't know for sure what exactly they're going to do with Charles Jagasaw.
Yeah.
Has Absher maybe ascended enough to make them feel confident about him at a tackle and move Jagasaw, or
Right.
at a guard and move Jagasaw back out to tackle? And look, I know some people get touchy when we start talking about all this. These are all legitimate questions. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, and no one's bagging on Anthony Knapp. I'll just say that.
Not at all.
Front, the last
could be
time
in
we
a
talked about Anthony Knapp, we had people, coming back at us. And
You could
everything
be in a
else.
lot worse position than having Anthony Knapp on your starting offensive line.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. I mean, because, did he struggle last year? Sure. In my opinion, was he playing out of position? Sure. He's got a whole offseason to kind of get some things figured out. So like I'm willing to kind of give it a bit of a wait and see situation. Now, am I more of a Lambert fan at tackle? Yeah, I am. And it really stunk when he got injured. And so if he's ready to go by July 1st, I think I give him a shot at competing for one of those spots. The problem is Anthony Knapp already entrenched in that spot?
Mhm.
So that's a different conversation though, too, right? That's a conversation of, is there, I hate to use the word favoritism, but is there a lean for the offensive line coach towards Anthony Knapp? Whereas if they're even, Anthony Knapp's going to get the start because he has all that experience and all of those things. So I think it's also a situation where Lambert would need to be significantly better to get the spot. And it would have to be very obvious that he's the better option.
But again, I think the odds are very high that the first team offensive line that we see line up on day 1 of training camp doesn't look the same as the one that takes the field on August 31st.
That's fair.
The way things have gone in Rudolph's first 2 years.
That's absolutely fair.
NFL draft starts tonight. Which Notre Dame guy gets drafted first? Benjamin Morrison or Xavier Watts?
I still think it's going to be Morrison just because of the value the teams place on corner as opposed to safety. And, Xavier Watts is going to make some team very happy. He's just not going to get drafted as high as all of us think he should. And I think he may end up having a longer career than Benjamin Morrison, but I think Benjamin Morrison goes earlier in the draft just because of the position, just because I don't even want to say name recognition because everybody knows who Xavier Watts is. It's so hard for me because you've got Xavier Watts on paper, right? And we know that he doesn't test super well. He's not super tall. He's not super long. But you throw in the tape and you watch him play, and it's like, how can you not draft this kid in the first round? He is going to instantly make your defense better, And so it's really tough. But I just think too many GMs out there are just too blindsided. They got the blinders on for what they see on paper. And that's why I think Ben Morrison goes first.
I'm going the other way. I think it is going to be
Watts. I love you. I love it. That's what I want to happen.
Going to be Watts because that's what you see on film.
Yeah.
Is Xavier Watts always around the football. And obviously, we know that Benjamin Morrison is just straight up talented. And if he hadn't gotten hurt, there's a really good chance he would have gone in the first round. But I think that hip injury, and you can couple that with the fact that he had a shoulder injury less than a year earlier, just a few months before the hip injury. I think that's going to be enough of a concern that I think there's a greater chance. I think I agree with what Josh was saying. I think Xavier Watts goes somewhere late in the second round. And then I think that Benjamin Morrison is early to mid third round type guy. I think there'll be just enough hesitancy because of the injury that teams aren't going to want to invest that high a pick in Morrison. But if he stays healthy, they're gonna get an absolute. They're gonna get a steal with either one of them.
Either one,
round,
yes,
but
either one.
They're gonna get a bigger steal with Morrison if he can stay healthy.
I think the most fun thing to watch in this draft, because obviously I think we can all agree, barring something unforeseen happening, we're not going to see a Notre Dame player called tonight.
Right.
It's going to be tomorrow, which is fine. I'm just very interested to see what the Bengals do when they start picking players. You know what I mean? Like,
how much input is Al Golden?
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm fascinated by that piece of it, right? And then you also have obviously the coaching staff out in LA with the Chargers. And there's some Notre Dame flavor over there. And so do you see the Chargers kind of stepping up and taking can you imagine Benjamin Morrison on one side, Cam Hart on the other side? Like, chalk me up as a Chargers fan.
I think Odie Gilman's still out there, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
So chalk me up, baby. Like, put on the powder blue. Let's go. But no, I think it's going to be fascinating to see where these guys all end up.
I think so too. Like you said, unfortunately not going to be tonight.
No. And maybe, but
doubtful. So my next question.
Yeah, this is an interesting
Which of these two guys gets drafted first? Jack Kaiser, Riley Leonard?
I think it's got to be Kaiser. I think Kaiser will probably. I think Kaiser will be an early day 3 guy. And I think Leonard will make again. I think Leonard's going to make a team very happy, but I just think he's going to fall beyond that.
I do too.
At the end of the day,
Mel Kiper Jr. has Kaiser as his number 138 overall player. He ranked his top 150.
Okay.
He doesn't have Leonard in his top 150. He's got Leonard as his number 9 quarterback. He's got Kaiser as his number 9 linebacker. Basically, the first 4 rounds are 128 players. So like you would expect, but again, here's what surprises me, Vince. Jalen Milroe is getting so much love in these last couple of weeks. People are talking about him possibly going in the first round of the draft. Like, if you look at Jalen Milroe and Riley Leonard, they're not that different. The playing style, everybody apparently loves Jalen Milroe's running ability. Well, have you watched Riley Leonard's game? Leonard's got a better completion percentage, than Jalen Milroe. He's got fewer interceptions in more games than what Milroe played last year, because you might have heard Alabama didn't, make it to the playoff, but Notre Dame got to the national championship game. And Leonard also has a better yards per carry than Jalen Milroe. So I don't understand the disparity, because we all watched Jalen Milroe the year before, and I know he got better last year than he was the year before when they made it into the playoff, but I don't see that big a gap between Milroe and Leonard. So I don't understand why Milroe is rated as highly as he is and why Leonard, I get to an extent, because we watch Leonard and we know, that there are, some things as a pro quarterback that he needs to be better at, the ability to work the ball downfield better and work it outside, better in some instances. But I just don't see Milroe being that much better than Leonard.
I see Riley Leonard being in the NFL longer than Jalen Milroe. That's what I'll say. Okay.
So somebody's going to get a huge bust if they even take Milroe in the second round.
I mean,
what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm hearing some weird stuff, and I'm reading on Twitter and things like that. If he would have come back to Alabama, the locker room really wouldn't have been all that enthusiastic about it, that kind of stuff. You've never heard anybody say anything like that about Riley Leonard. And if you're going to be a backup quarterback in this league, look, I'm not saying Riley Leonard's going to get drafted and be an all-time starter or anything like that. But if you're going to be a backup quarterback in this league, which I think he could be, you need to be a guy that, number one, is smart, check. You need a guy that's going to be a good teammate, and help out the starter, check. He checks all of those boxes, you know what I mean? And if you need him to come in, you could make him a short yardage guy, number one. Number two, if you need him to come in for a spot start, something like that, you might have to adjust your offense a little bit, but he'll get you through. You know what I mean? So I just feel like he checks a lot of those backup quarterback boxes that I'm not sure Jalen Milroe does.
Yeah.
That's all.
You put him in the right place, he's got a chance
Yeah.
to continue to grow and make a lot of improvements and grow into something bigger within maybe 3 or 4 years. Over under 6.5 Notre Dame players who are going to be drafted.
This is
this
so
weekend.
hard because basically the number is 6 or 7, and I know that's why you said it where you did. It's so hard because you just don't know, and I always feel like with Notre Dame guys, some guys get overdrafted, some guys get underdrafted or they're not drafted at all. I'll say under. I'm gonna be the pessimist of the show. I'll say under because I think it'll be 6.
So Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison, Riley Leonard, Jack Kaiser, Mitchell Evans gets you to 5.
Yeah.
A lot of people are figuring Riley Mills is going to get drafted, and Andrew was asking about him being rated so low. He's actually, like in terms of, player rating, Mel Kiper Jr. has Riley Mills as his 117th best player. The problem with Mills is the injury. He tore his ACL,
right?
And the odds are he's not going to be able to play at all.
It's going to drop him
as a rookie. Yeah. So like, to me, that's more of like, you take a flyer maybe in the 6th or 7th round. I think he'll end up getting drafted. So that gets you to 6 right there. So the question is Bo Collins, Howard Cross, RJ Oben, who, by the way, PFF has getting drafted. PFF has 7 guys, including Oben, getting drafted.
Okay.
ESPN is projecting 5 as of right now. And then you've got Jordan Clark as well. I think as an NFL, like you've got 2 NFL legacies, 3 NFL legacies with Cross, Oben, and Clark. I feel like Clark has got the best chance of all of them.
That's a pretty great point on your part. Yeah, that's a pretty great point. The legacy thing is legit. You know what I mean? Like I could see that being a turning point on getting somebody drafted late in the draft.
You're like maybe the Giants in the 6th or 7th round. Again, take a flyer on one of those guys because Cross and Oben's dads both played together.
Right.
With the Giants.
Biggest question: does Mitch Jeter get drafted?
Ooh, I'm going to say no.
Nah, probably not.
Hard for kickers, man.
Yeah, it is hard for kickers.
All these guys, I think, are going to get signed by somebody if they don't get drafted.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. How much of the draft do you think you're going to watch tonight?
I'll watch the whole thing. I like the first round. I will watch a lot of it tomorrow, depending on what's going on in my life. But if I'm home, I'll watch it. The weekend one, that's where it starts to drag for me because that's when, you get the analysts just kind of talking and the draft is like happening in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So
they just yak.
The first 2 nights I'm in, the second day, I'll be watching like on my phone for like updates. Like that's where I'll be.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of, I don't have to wait until the 20s this year for the Cowboys to pick because they were obviously not as good last year. So fortunately, I only have to wait till 12 unless they trade down, which I think is an option as well. I think they could trade up or down. I think it's more likely they trade down than up. I think I'm going to be locked in at least until like this feels like the Shadur Sanders watch for good or bad.
Yeah.
What this feels like.
What are your thoughts on Shadur Sanders? Have you watched a lot of his games?
I haven't watched a lot. I mean, I've seen mostly highlights. Sure. I feel like a lot of other guys. I feel like he's a good quarterback, did not have a great offensive line other than Travis Hunter. Mm-hmm. There was not that much, else around him. I think he's got a good arm, not a great arm. Mm-hmm. But I think that like the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21 are kind of what people are talking about as a potential landing spot. And I think that it, kind of like I've heard a lot of people say, like if you're Mike Tomlin and you feel good, whether it's Jalen Milroe or Shadur Sanders or Jackson Dart, if you feel good about any of those 3, I could see any of them ending up in Pittsburgh because they desperately need a quarterback, but they also don't want to just take a quarterback to take a quarterback. Gotcha. I'm fairly torn on what I think Shadur Sanders is going to be because it feels like he has just been so picked apart. He
has been. There's obviously benefits to who he is as far as like who his dad is and what his last name is, and there's also negatives, right? I don't think he goes to Jackson State if he didn't want to play for his dad. I think he goes someplace else
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
if he has a different last name, right? Do I think, I just don't see him as a first round quarterback personally. But quarterbacks are so overvalued, so I don't even know what
But
kind of
that's the
standard that
thing.
even
Like
is.
who really
Right.
realistically is,
Right.
a first round quarterback?
It's tough for me. I don't know. I just don't see him as a sustainable starting quarterback in the NFL. And I don't think he'd be happy being a backup. So I just don't know what his career is going to look like. I'll just say that.
But again, like with what he's going to have at Pittsburgh, it's like you got a head coach that knows how to win.
Sure.
I think they'd build the offense around you. You got a couple great wide receivers to throw the football to. You got a good running back. So like,
if he's average though, he's not going to last long.
Yeah, I
in
know.
Pittsburgh. That's the thing.
I'm not convinced any of these guys are first round.
That's fair. I think that's a fair assessment
because they're
too.
quarterbacks. At least a couple of them are going to go in the first round.
That's a fair set. Now, here's the other piece. Regardless of his talent level, drafting him means you're drafting the Sanders family. Like, are you welcoming that circus to town?
That's DK saying you really see Tomlin dealing with that. I mean, I think that there's a level of respect that Deion Sanders probably has for a guy like Mike Tomlin that he's
Fair.
not going to have a level, the same level of respect for a lot of other coaches. And vice versa, like because it's Deion Sanders. Like I don't see Deion, trying to pull the puppet strings in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Specifically.
Well, and it's going to be interesting because especially if he goes to Pittsburgh, I mean, you're talking Colorado way over here. You're talking Pittsburgh way over here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's, multiple time zones. I mean, in theory, Deion Sanders is still trying to, run a football program at Colorado. And so, what does that mean for, the dad side of things? I don't know.
I like how DK is
he's just poking the bear, baby.
Is trying to tell me that it's a circus in Pittsburgh, but it's perfect for Dallas just because Dallas already is a circus, I guess. I guess. But yeah.
Well, you draft him, then you get Deion as the head coach soon. So there you go.
Yeah. So Vince, ABC's Wide World of Sports made its debut on this date in 1961. Are you old enough to have any memory of ABC's Wide World of Sports?
No. Is the answer. I know of it. I know that it existed, but I never saw it as like a live situation. No.
The old Jim McKay spanning the globe.
Yeah, that's
to bring you the constant variety of sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And
I've heard all of those things.
The music's bum, 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 and the music's playing, and they show the guy wipe out on the skis and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you've ever seen.
I have seen
one,
that,
but
yeah.
it was obviously predated ESPN by almost 2 decades. ESPN was
ESPN was 78, 79.
Yeah. And they,
so ESPN's almost the same age as me. That's why how I know that. It's a little bit older.
That's and it's ultimately ESPN is what did in Wide World of Sports because you had a 24-hour, multiple 24-hour sports stations that were showing a lot of the same things, like ESPN was showing Australian rules football and all these different things, like when they were getting off the ground. But Wide World of Sports, it would come on for a couple hours on Saturday, and they would just you never knew where they were going to be from one week to the next. Like they'd be at a sailing event one week, and they'd be at in Mexico at one of those cliff diving competitions the next week, and then they're in China, badminton competitions and just all kinds of crazy stuff. So it was the original Ocho is what Andrew said.
I think that's actually pretty funny.
Yep. But yeah, I saw that this morning. It's like, wow, 1961 on this date. But that used to be, again, back when there were 3 channels and nothing else on, it was ABC's Wide World of Sports, man. Back in the day.
That's 65 years old, 64 years old, right?
Something like that. 64. Man. Making me feel another day older. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for tonight. Jesse will be here tomorrow, and it's going to be interesting as we call him out Time to pay the piper.
That's got to be the number one topic
For
tomorrow.
his ill-informed wager with Vince and I.
We tried, and I want to go on record because we tried to prevent him from making this bet on the air. You can go back and you can listen. We tried to save him from himself, but it kept doubling
down. He kept doubling down.
It did not work.
Normal time, Joe. 5:00 is the plan for tomorrow. Thanks for asking. Since I know we have changed the time a few times in the last couple.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, we should be good.
All right, great questions in the mailbag tonight. Vince enjoyed it as always. Everybody else, we will talk to you tomorrow. Hit that like button before you check out, and we'll talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.
See you, everybody.